I am Camille. I am 30 years old. Exactly 2 weeks ago, at my supposedly joyous 30th birthday celebration, my own mother publicly handed me a devastating gift that will violently burn in my memory for the absolute rest of my life. I desperately want you to picture this horrific scene. There are 40 distinguished guests gathered in a private room at a 5-star, exclusive downtown restaurant. Soft, flickering candles are glowing warmly on an expensive, tiered birthday cake. And then, my mother aggressively grabs the microphone, demands the room's absolute attention, and loudly announces to everyone present that I was merely adopted as a convenient tax write-off. She explicitly stated that I was absolutely never truly considered a part of their real family, and that my 30 agonizing years of desperately trying to belong meant absolutely nothing to her. My younger sister, Megan, actually burst into cruel, hysterical laughter from across the room. My father, Richard, cowardly refused to even lift his eyes from his plate to look at me. But what absolutely none of them knew in that explosive moment was that I possessed a heavy, sealed envelope safely tucked inside my small clutch purse. An envelope explicitly given to me by my late grandmother Grace. And exactly what was contained inside that fragile paper would make my mother physically run out of her own meticulously planned party in absolute terror before the night was even over. Before I continue unpacking this nightmare, if you find yourself connecting with stories of profound family betrayal and ultimate, cold vindication, please take a moment to engage with this video. But I ask that you only do so if you genuinely, deeply want to hear exactly how this massive reckoning unfolded. I would also love to know exactly who is listening to my voice right now. Please drop your current city and your local time down in the comments section. Now, I need to pull you backward in time. Let me take you back exactly 1 month prior to the specific, quiet Thursday evening I received a phone call that permanently altered the entire trajectory of my existence. It was approaching 8 o'clock at night. I was still sitting exhausted at my desk at Harrison and Cole Architecture, meticulously reviewing complex blueprints for a massive commercial renovation project, a project that would ultimately cease to matter to me in exactly 48 hours. My personal cell phone vibrated violently against the wooden desk. I glanced at the screen. It was a completely unknown number originating from a Boston area code. I almost aggressively ignored it. In my experience, unknown numbers usually signaled annoying spam callers or aggressive debt collectors. But some strange, unnameable instinct deep inside my gut compelled me to swipe the screen and answer. "Ms. Atwood?" A man's deep, measured, highly professional voice inquired. "My name is Theodore Whitman. I proudly served as your late grandmother's primary estate attorney." I immediately sat up ramrod straight in my ergonomic desk chair. Grandma Grace had peacefully passed away exactly 6 months prior. We had already endured the somber funeral service, formally read the finalized will with the family, and said our final goodbyes. Why on earth was her private lawyer unexpectedly calling me now? "There is a highly critical matter I urgently need to discuss with you," he continued, his tone dropping an octave. "In person. It explicitly concerns highly confidential documents your grandmother intentionally left specifically for you." I was utterly confused. "I honestly do not understand, Mr. Whitman. I was under the impression the entire estate was already legally settled." "This specific matter is entirely separate from the primary estate," he paused, allowing the weight of his words to settle. "Your grandmother left incredibly explicit, ironclad instructions that absolutely no one else in your extended family should possess any knowledge of this conversation. She was highly, aggressively particular about maintaining absolute secrecy regarding that detail." My heart instantly began to pound a frantic, terrifying rhythm against my ribs. Grandma Grace was literally the only human being in my entire sprawling, affluent family who had ever made me feel like I was not a defective, unwanted outsider. She was the one who had gently squeezed my trembling hand under the dining table when my mother, Patricia, launched her subtle, cutting verbal digs. She was the one who had softly whispered to me once, while I was violently crying alone in her sprawling rose garden, "You absolutely belong in this house significantly more than you know, my sweet girl. One day, I promise you, you will fully understand." I had absolutely never comprehended exactly what she meant by those cryptic words. Exactly when can we arrange to meet? I asked, my voice shaking slightly. Tomorrow morning at exactly 9 o'clock. I will securely text you the private office address. After I disconnected the call, I sat completely paralyzed in my dark, quiet office for a very long time. Grandma Grace had meticulously kept massive, explosive secrets. Secrets intended exclusively for my eyes. A tiny, terrified part of me was deeply afraid of exactly what I might uncover. A significantly larger, desperate part of my soul violently needed to know the unvarnished truth. Later that night, I finally returned home to my cramped apartment. It was a tiny, drafty one-bedroom unit that I rented entirely alone, because continuing to live with my toxic family had absolutely never been a viable option for my mental survival. My phone suddenly buzzed again on the kitchen counter. It was a notification from the massive family group chat. Patricia Atwood, my supposed mother, or rather, the cold woman who had reluctantly raised me, had aggressively sent a new message. Massive news. We are officially throwing Camille a spectacular 30th birthday dinner at the Sterling. Saturday the 15th, exactly at 7 p.m. Absolutely everyone is formally invited. I blankly read the glowing text message 3 consecutive times to ensure I was not actively hallucinating. The Sterling was universally known as one of Boston's absolute most exclusive, exorbitantly expensive dining establishments. My wealthy parents had absolutely never, not a single time in my 30 years of existence, thrown me a lavish party of that magnitude. For my 18th milestone birthday, I received a painfully quiet, awkward family dinner. I was presented with a cheap, stale grocery store sheet cake and a generic, drugstore greeting card containing absolutely zero handwritten words inside, just a stamped "Happy Birthday." That exact same year, my younger sister, Megan, turned 15. They threw her a massive, catered pool party featuring 30 of her closest friends, a professional club DJ, and a hired event photographer. I vividly remembered sitting at my own miserable, pathetic birthday dinner, silently watching Patricia politely introduce arriving guests. This is our beautiful daughter, Megan, and this is Camille. That tiny, deliberate, agonizing pause she always maliciously inserted right before uttering my name. I had heard that specific, toxic hesitation 1,000 times. I stared intently at Patricia's group text. Why exactly now? Why this sudden, grand, highly public gesture of affection? Something felt fundamentally, horrifyingly wrong. It felt exactly like miraculously finding a $100 bill resting on the sidewalk and intrinsically knowing there absolutely had to be a dangerous, hidden catch attached to it. But maybe, a tiny, pathetic, desperate voice inside my head whispered, a voice I still could not entirely silence. Maybe she is finally, genuinely trying to be a mother. Maybe turning 30 actually meant something to her. Maybe this time is truly different. I slowly typed back my response. Wow, thank you so incredibly much. I am genuinely so surprised. Patricia's reply materialized almost instantly. You absolutely deserve it, sweetheart. Sweetheart. She had absolutely never, ever referred to me as sweetheart in my entire life. I slowly set down my phone and stared blankly up at the cracked ceiling. Tomorrow morning, I was scheduled to meet with Grandma Grace's secretive lawyer. Something deep inside my gut explicitly told me I absolutely needed to know exactly what was contained in those hidden documents before I dared to walk into any elaborate, public party Patricia was aggressively orchestrating. Theodore Whitman's private legal office smelled intensely of aging, expensive leather, and heavily polished mahogany. He looked exactly like the quintessential, powerful estate attorney you would imagine. Thick silver hair, sharp wire-rimmed glasses, and the specific kind of firm, no-nonsense handshake that instantly signaled serious business. Please have a seat, Ms. Atwood. He carefully placed a massive, thick envelope squarely onto the center of the desk between us. It was heavy, cream-colored stationery, aggressively sealed with dark red wax and explicitly stamped with Grandma Grace's familiar initials, GA. Your grandmother meticulously prepared this specific document exactly 5 years ago, he stated, folding his hands together. She executed this when she was in absolutely perfect, vibrant health and of entirely, undeniably sound legal mind. She aggressively made me swear a blood oath to deliver it exclusively to you, and absolutely only after her passing. I gently touched the thick envelope. It physically felt heavy with decades of buried secrets. What exactly is contained inside? A certified copy of her final, unaltered will, a highly personal, handwritten letter, and a secondary, much smaller sealed envelope that she explicitly instructed you absolutely not to open unless, in her exact words, it became absolutely, unavoidably necessary. He intensely met my eyes. She firmly stated that you would intrinsically know exactly when the time was right to open it. My hands violently trembled as I carefully broke the heavy wax seal. I pulled out the dense legal will first. I frantically scanned the complex, bureaucratic legal language until my eyes finally locked onto my name. I hereby legally bequeath the entirety of the Anderson family estate, along with absolutely all physical property, acreage, and valuable contents contained therein, exclusively to my beloved granddaughter, Camille Atwood. I completely stopped pulling oxygen into my lungs. The Anderson family estate. Grandma Grace's sprawling, multi-million-dollar historic mansion. The massive house where absolutely every major holiday dinner was hosted, every sprawling family reunion, every highly important, elite gathering. The exact same house that Patricia had aggressively decorated, meticulously maintained, and arrogantly treated for 20 entire years exactly as if she already legally owned the deed. This absolutely cannot be correct, I stammered, staring at the lawyer. It is entirely 100% legally binding, Ms. Atwood. 3 independent, highly respected attorneys physically witnessed the signing. Extensive video documentation of her lucidity currently exists in my vault. But why on earth would she leave it exclusively to me? Mr. Whitman slowly slid the handwritten letter across the mahogany desk. Perhaps this specific document will properly explain her reasoning. He leaned intensely forward, his expression turning incredibly grave. The primary estate will officially goes onto the public record in exactly 2 weeks. Your grandmother explicitly wanted you to possess adequate time to prepare yourself. Prepare myself for what exactly? For exactly what your toxic family might aggressively attempt to do when they finally discover the truth. I waited until exactly midnight to read Grandma Grace's letter in the safety of my own apartment. The space was pitch black except for the glow of a single, cheap desk lamp. Outside my window, the city of Boston hummed with distant, indifferent traffic. I carefully unfolded the thick pages. Her elegant, sweeping handwriting was so achingly familiar it made my chest physically hurt, and I began to read. My dearest, beautiful Camille. If you are currently reading these words, then my physical body is permanently gone, and there are incredibly heavy things I absolutely should have confessed to you while I was still alive. I was simply not brave enough to face the fallout back then. I am so profoundly sorry. First, please know this absolute truth. I have fiercely, unconditionally loved you from the exact moment I first held you in my arms. Not because I felt socially obligated to, but because you were a brilliant, vibrant light in a toxic family that had entirely forgotten how to genuinely shine. Second, I am so incredibly sorry I absolutely could not protect you better from the abuse. I silently watched Patricia aggressively diminish your soul year after agonizing year, and I absolutely should have fought significantly harder for you. I should have aggressively spoken up. Third, and this is undeniably the absolute hardest part for you to read. You are absolutely not a random stranger, Camille. You are absolutely not some discarded child casually adopted for tax convenience. You inherently belong to this family infinitely more deeply than anyone has ever dared to tell you. You are my actual blood. My real, biological blood. I absolutely cannot safely explain everything in this letter. The smaller, sealed envelope contains the entire, explosive truth. Comprehensive documentation, undeniable proof, absolutely everything you will legally need when you are finally ready. But please, I implore you, open it exclusively when you absolutely must. Open it only when you are emotionally prepared to face exactly what it means. Be incredibly brave, my darling girl. You are infinitely stronger than they have ever allowed you to believe. All my eternal love, forever, Grandma Grace. I sat and read the devastating letter again, and again, and again. You are my real blood. What on earth did that actually mean? I was undeniably adopted. Patricia had aggressively, maliciously ensured I absolutely never forgot that specific fact for a single day of my life. But Grandma Grace explicitly stated I organically belonged. She explicitly stated there was undeniable proof. I slowly looked at the smaller, inner envelope, still heavily sealed with wax. Only open when absolutely necessary. I locked the explosive envelope safely inside my small fireproof safe that exact night. Something deep inside my very bones explicitly told me I would desperately need it very, very soon. What I absolutely did not know then, what I would absolutely not discover until significantly later, was that entirely across town, Patricia was actively, maliciously orchestrating explosive plans of her own. I eventually pieced the entire, horrific story together afterward from exactly what Aunt Helen tearfully confessed to me, and what I could logically infer from the smoking wreckage. Patricia had been aggressively pacing the length of her pristine living room. Megan sat lazily on the expensive sofa, mindlessly scrolling through her social media feed. I found out the horrific truth today, Patricia stated, her voice tight with unadulterated fury. About the finalized will. Megan briefly looked up from her screen. What specific will? Your supposed grandmother's will. That senile old woman maliciously left the entire estate to Camille. Patricia's hands were visibly shaking with pure rage. The entire massive thing. The historic house, the sprawling land, absolutely everything. What? Megan dropped her phone onto the cushions in shock. How is that even legally possible? It is entirely legal. She executed the changes years ago, completely behind everyone's back, and the damn will goes onto the public record in exactly 2 weeks. But that massive house, Mom, you have been aggressively planning to inherit and renovate it for years. You have been planning to. I explicitly know. Patricia's jaw tightened into a rigid, dangerous line. Which is precisely why we urgently need to act right now. What exactly do you mean? Patricia stopped her frantic pacing. Her eyes went completely, terrifyingly cold. The upcoming birthday party. 40 elite guests. Absolutely everyone who socially matters in our circle. Megan frowned deeply. I honestly do not understand your plan. Camille has pathetically spent 30 entire years desperately trying to earn her place in this family. She is absolutely, pathetically desperate to finally belong. Patricia smiled, but there was absolutely nothing warm or maternal in the expression. If we aggressively, publicly humiliate her, if we really, truly humiliate her in front of everyone she knows, she will be entirely too violently ashamed to ever show her face in this city again. And once she permanently flees in disgrace, aggressively contesting that fraudulent will in court becomes significantly easier. Megan hesitated for a fraction of a second. Mom, that is honestly kind of incredibly harsh. That multi-million-dollar house was legally supposed to be your future inheritance, Megan. Are you genuinely going to just sit back and allow some adopted, pathetic charity case to maliciously steal it from you? The brief hesitation instantly vanished from Megan's face. Exactly what do you need me to do? They possessed absolutely no idea exactly what explosive secrets Grandma Grace had left me, and they possessed absolutely no idea that I was finally, entirely ready to use them. Exactly 1 week prior to the extravagant party, I was standing inside a high-end Nordstrom department store doing something I absolutely rarely did, aggressively spending money entirely on myself. A beautiful dress. Something genuinely stunning. If my toxic family was actually, miraculously throwing me a real birthday celebration, I desperately wanted to look and feel exactly like I truly deserved to be present in the room. The emerald green one, a familiar voice stated directly behind me. It will perfectly bring out the color of your eyes. I quickly turned around. Lucas Smith, my absolute closest friend and trusted colleague at the architectural firm, was standing there grinning widely. Are you actively stalking my movements now? I saw you standing through the massive display window. You looked exactly like you were aggressively overthinking something again. He gently tilted his head, his expression turning serious. Talk to me. What is going on? So I did. I quietly told him absolutely everything about the mysterious lawyer, the shocking will, and the devastating letter. Not absolutely everything. I entirely omitted the part about potentially being biological blood, but I shared enough. Lucas listened incredibly intently, absolutely never interrupting me. Then he said something profound that I would absolutely never forget. Camille, you have blindly walked directly into that toxic family's malicious traps for your entire existence. If there is even a microscopic fraction of a chance that this extravagant party is just another elaborate trap. He looked at me incredibly seriously. Do absolutely not walk into that room empty-handed. What exactly do you mean by that? Bring absolutely every single document your grandmother left you. Just strictly in case. Lucas, I honestly do not want to aggressively turn my own 30th birthday into a violent war zone. You highly likely might not possess a choice in the matter. He gently squeezed my shoulder. Just be aggressively prepared. That is absolutely all I am advising you to do. That specific night, I meticulously laid absolutely everything out across my bedspread. The certified will, the emotional letter, and the smaller, sealed envelope I still had absolutely not gathered the courage to open. The elegant clutch purse I had purchased to match the emerald dress was incredibly small, barely possessing enough room for a phone and a lipstick, but it was exactly just big enough to hold the explosive truth. I securely tucked the heavy envelope inside. Just in case, I repeatedly whispered to myself. I absolutely did not know then exactly how terrifyingly right Lucas would be. I absolutely did not know that in exactly 7 days, I would confidently stand in front of 40 people, and those specific documents would be the absolute only shield standing between me and complete, utter psychological destruction. The Sterling restaurant absolutely took my breath away. Massive, glittering crystal chandeliers cast dancing, golden light across the pristine white linen tablecloths. Sprawling, floor-to-ceiling windows perfectly framed the glittering, iconic Boston skyline. A massive, U-shaped banquet table aggressively dominated the center of the private room, and positioned at its absolute center sat a beautiful chair elegantly wrapped in a massive silk ribbon. My designated chair. 40 distinguished guests had already arrived. Distant relatives I explicitly saw exactly once a year, wealthy, elite friends of my parents, and a few specific corporate colleagues Patricia had aggressively insisted I invite, to make the humiliating spectacle look incredibly real and public. I would later brutally realize. Camille, the beautiful birthday girl. Patricia aggressively swept across the room toward me draped in an expensive navy designer dress, her arms flung wide open. Her physical hug was incredibly stiff and rigid, her blinding smile absolutely not quite reaching the freezing ice in her eyes. Thank you so incredibly much for organizing all this, I stated tentatively. It is honestly a lot to take in. You absolutely deserve it, sweetheart. That toxic, weaponized word again. Sweetheart. My father, Richard, abruptly appeared next to her. He offered a brief, incredibly limp handshake, his eyes aggressively refusing to meet my gaze. Happy birthday, he murmured quietly, already actively retreating back into the crowd. Megan absolutely did not even bother with a basic greeting. She stood aggressively in the far corner of the room, her smartphone raised high, actively recording the scene, exactly like she was documenting a pathetic zoo exhibit for her followers. And then I finally saw her. Aunt Helen. She had miraculously flown in all the way from California, an action she almost never executed. She was my father's older sister, the absolute only adult in the family who had ever attempted to defend me when I was a terrified child. She quickly crossed the crowded room and wrapped me in a genuine, real embrace, warm, fierce, and highly protective. And then she whispered something directly into my ear that made the blood in my veins run completely, freezing cold. Absolutely whatever horrific thing happens tonight, please always remember this. Your grandmother would be so incredibly, profoundly proud of the woman you are. I violently pulled back from the hug. What exactly do you mean by that? A hovering server loudly called absolutely everyone to take their assigned seats before she could offer an answer. I slowly sat down in my ribbon-wrapped chair, my clutch resting heavily in my lap, aggressively scanning the faces surrounding me. 40 diverse witnesses. Whatever malicious event Patricia had meticulously planned, she explicitly wanted a massive audience. Fine. If she desperately wanted an audience, she was absolutely going to get an unforgettable one. The hidden envelope aggressively pressed against my thigh exactly like a pounding heartbeat. The lavish dinner itself was perfectly fine. Expensive salmon, roasted asparagus, highly polite, meaningless conversation. I actually, foolishly, almost began to relax. Then, Patricia aggressively stood up from her seat. She flawlessly smoothed down her expensive dress, confidently walked over to the small, wooden podium, and sharply tapped the microphone. The ambient conversation in the room died instantly. Thank you all so incredibly much for gathering here tonight. Her voice dripped with artificial, saccharine honey. We are gathered here to celebrate someone incredibly special. Our lovely Camille is officially turning 30. Polite applause rippled through the room, accompanied by warm smiles. I fiercely gripped my cloth napkin tightly beneath the table. 30 entire years, Patricia continued smoothly. Can you honestly believe it? It literally feels exactly like yesterday that she first came into our lives. Something microscopic violently shifted in her vocal tone, a slight, jagged edge, barely perceptible to anyone but me. I have been thinking a lot lately about Camille's long journey, about exactly where she originally came from, about absolutely everything this generous family has done for her. The ambient air in the room noticeably changed. I physically felt the shift before my brain even fully understood it. We have aggressively supported her through her education, through her entire career, through absolutely everything. Patricia's smile violently widened into a rictus grin. We have fiercely loved her exactly like she was actually one of us. My stomach completely plummeted into a dark abyss. But I strongly think Patricia paused incredibly dramatically, aggressively scanning the silent room. I think it is finally time we were completely honest with everyone. Don't you? Confused murmurs rapidly rippled through the gathered guests. Highly uncomfortable glances were quickly exchanged across the tables. I slowly looked over at my father. He was staring intensely at his expensive porcelain plate, his shoulders heavily hunched over, aggressively refusing to look up. I looked over at Megan. Her smartphone was held high, actively recording the scene, a vicious, cruel smile plastered across her face. For 30 entire years, Patricia loudly announced, "We have kept a massive secret." But toxic secrets inherently have a specific way of eventually coming out, don't they? And I strongly think tonight, on Camille's incredibly special milestone day, she inherently deserves to finally know the absolute truth. My heart pounded so violently hard against my ribs I could literally hear the rushing sound in my ears. Directly across the table, Aunt Helen half rose from her chair, her face completely pale. "Patricia." Her voice was incredibly sharp and warning. "Do absolutely not do this." Patricia completely, utterly ignored her. "Camille, sweetheart." She slowly turned to face me directly, her eyes glittering with pure, unadulterated malice. "Are you entirely ready to hear the unvarnished truth? Camille is absolutely not our biological daughter." The devastating words violently hit the room exactly like a detonating bomb. Loud gasps, frantic whispers. 40 pairs of shocked eyes simultaneously swiveled to stare directly at me. "She is officially adopted." Patricia's voice rang through the speakers with something that sounded terrifyingly like pure triumph. "We graciously took her in when she was exactly 2 years old, and do you want to know exactly why?" I sat completely frozen in my chair. I couldn't move a single muscle. I couldn't pull oxygen into my lungs. Massive tax benefits. Patricia actually let out a loud, genuine laugh. The federal government possessed this absolutely wonderful financial program back then. Adopt a needy child, receive a massive, lucrative tax deduction. Richard and I simply thought, well, why not? We could absolutely use the massive financial write-off. My ears were violently ringing. The entire, opulent room aggressively blurred at the edges. Somewhere directly to my left, Megan's cruel laughter pierced the suffocating silence, sharp, vicious, and aggressively echoing off the crystal chandeliers. "So there it officially is," Patricia continued relentlessly, spreading her hands wide exactly like a victorious performer taking a final bow. "The unvarnished truth. Camille was absolutely never really a true part of this family. She was simply a highly calculated financial decision. She slowly turned back to me with highly exaggerated, performative sympathy. I deeply hope this specific revelation doesn't overly upset you, sweetheart. But after 30 exhausting years of constantly pretending, I genuinely thought you inherently deserved some basic honesty. I literally could not feel my own hands. I couldn't feel a single thing. 40 people openly stared at me, some visibly horrified, some deeply pitying. One wealthy woman in the back was already frantically whispering the gossip to her husband. My cowardly father still had absolutely not moved an inch, had not looked up from his plate, had not uttered a single, solitary word in my defense. Megan slowly lowered her phone just long enough to maliciously call out, "Happy 30th birthday, sis." More cruel laughter echoed from somewhere in the room. The agonizing silence stretched out endlessly. Patricia simply stood there and waited. She was eagerly waiting for me to violently crumble into tears, to aggressively cry, to frantically flee the room in absolute, public humiliation. That is exactly what she expected. That is exactly what she had meticulously planned for months. But then I distinctly felt it. The heavy, comforting weight of the sealed envelope resting safely in my clutch purse. Grandma Grace's final words echoing powerfully in my mind, "Be incredibly brave, my darling girl." I took a massive, deep breath and I slowly stood up. I confidently stood up. I absolutely did not speak immediately. I simply stood there, intentionally allowing the suffocating silence to aggressively stretch out, allowing 40 pairs of staring eyes to clearly register that I was absolutely not crying, I was absolutely not running away, and I was absolutely not executing any of the pathetic reactions Patricia had meticulously scripted in her head. My hands were trembling slightly with adrenaline, but my voice emerged incredibly steady and cold. "Thank you so much, Patricia, for that incredibly illuminating, insightful speech." Her triumphant smile violently faltered. This was absolutely not how the script was supposed to play out. I slowly looked around the massive room. I looked at the distant relatives who had actively treated me like invisible furniture for decades. I looked at the affluent family friends who had silently watched Patricia aggressively belittle me for years and absolutely never intervened. I looked at my cowardly father, still desperately refusing to raise his head. I looked at Megan, her smartphone still actively recording the scene. Good. Let her aggressively record absolutely everything. "You are entirely right about one specific thing," I stated smoothly. "It undeniably is the perfect time for the absolute truth." I slowly reached into my small clutch purse. Patricia's confident expression visibly flickered. Severe uncertainty rapidly crept into her eyes. "Camille, this really isn't the appropriate." "Oh, but it absolutely is." I confidently pulled out the heavy, cream-colored envelope. The dark red wax seal clearly displaying Grandma Grace's embossed initials. "You aggressively wanted to execute this public spectacle, Patricia. You wanted to do it directly in front of 40 captive witnesses. So let us absolutely do this properly." The entire room went absolutely, terrifyingly still. I briefly caught Aunt Helen's intense gaze across the table. She offered me a very small, almost imperceptible, proud nod. "Your beloved grandmother would be so incredibly proud." I looked down at exactly what I held in my hands. Absolutely everything Grandma Grace had meticulously saved specifically for me. Absolutely everything she desperately wanted me to know. For one brief, fleeting moment, I actually considered putting the envelope away, peacefully walking out the door, taking the alleged high road. Then I vividly remembered every single holiday dinner where I was forced to sit silently in the corner. Every single milestone birthday they completely forgot. Every single time Patricia introduced Megan first and aggressively treated my existence as a pathetic afterthought. 30 entire years of being maliciously made to feel exactly like I fundamentally did not belong on this earth. Absolutely no more. "Are you completely ready, Patricia?" I asked incredibly calmly. "Ready for the absolute, unvarnished truth?" Her face had completely drained of all blood, turning a sickly white. Exactly 2 weeks ago, I began, my voice carrying clearly across the utterly silent room. I received a highly unexpected call from Theodore Whitman, a prominent estate attorney. Some of the individuals in this room may intimately know his name. He exclusively handled my late grandmother's complex legal affairs. Patricia's entire body went absolutely, rigidly stiff. He possessed highly confidential documents to deliver to me. Documents my beloved grandmother meticulously prepared exactly 5 years ago, when she was incredibly healthy, mentally sharp, and explicitly knew exactly what she was executing. I confidently held up the heavy envelope. This specific document is a certified, notarized copy of her final will, heavily witnessed by 3 independent, elite attorneys. It is completely, undeniably legal. Camille. Patricia's voice sounded incredibly strained and panicked. This is absolutely not the appropriate place to publicly discuss. This is exactly the perfect place. I intentionally kept my vocal tone incredibly calm and highly professional. You aggressively made it the perfect place the exact second you publicly called me a tax write-off in front of absolutely everyone I know. Several affluent guests physically shifted incredibly uncomfortably in their seats. Someone in the back loudly coughed. So, let us deeply discuss the concept of truth, Patricia. You seem to aggressively love the truth so incredibly much. I deliberately opened the envelope flap. Let me generously share some of it with you. Megan had finally lowered her smartphone. Her cruel, mocking smile was completely gone. My father finally, slowly looked up from his plate. His face had turned a terrifying, ashen shade of gray. I slowly pulled out the very first legal document. Do you desperately want to know exactly what this says? Patricia's eyes were wide with an emotion I had absolutely never witnessed on her face before. Pure, unadulterated fear. It explicitly states that Grandma Grace legally left me the entirety of the Anderson family estate. The massive house, the sprawling land, the valuable contents. Absolutely everything. The entire room violently erupted into chaotic whispers. That is mathematically impossible. Patricia started to argue weakly. It is entirely 100% legal. I violently cut her off. I can easily recite the exact legal language if you would like, word for grueling word. Patricia's mouth opened wide and closed repeatedly. Absolutely nothing coherent came out. But here is the truly fascinating part. I smiled. It was an incredibly calm, terrifyingly controlled smile. The multi-million-dollar house isn't even the most interesting part of this revelation. I actively watched all the remaining color aggressively drain from her face. Do you actively want to tell them the rest of the story, Patricia, or should I gladly do the honors? Let me pause the narrative here for just a brief second. If you have successfully made it this far into the story, and you are desperately dying to know exactly what else is hidden inside that envelope, tap the like button right now and drop a comment telling me what explosive secret you think Grandma Grace left behind. I promise you, I read every single comment, and trust me, exactly what I am about to reveal is significantly wilder and more devastating than absolutely anything you are currently guessing. Okay, let us dive back into the chaos. Patricia desperately attempted to recover her shattered composure. Camille, this is absolutely not the appropriate time or place to discuss complex estate matters. Oh, goodness. I see. Not the appropriate time? I let out a soft, freezing laugh. You literally just proudly told 40 people that I was a pathetic tax deduction. You absolutely do not get to dictate when it is not the time anymore. Frantic whispers violently rippled through the assembled guests. Highly uncomfortable, shocked glances rapidly passed between wealthy couples. This is a highly confidential, private family matter. Patricia took a threatening step toward me. We absolutely should continue this conversation privately. No. My voice absolutely did not waver an inch. You explicitly wanted a massive audience for your cruel performance. You have absolutely got one now. Patricia violently spun toward my father. Absolute desperation heavily leaked into her voice. Richard, for God's sake, say something to stop her. Every single eye in the room immediately shifted to focus entirely on him. Richard Anderson, the cowardly man who had supposedly been my father for 30 years without ever truly acting like a father, slowly raised his heavy head. Pat, he stated incredibly quietly, his voice breaking. Perhaps we really should just let Camille finish speaking. Patricia looked exactly as if she had just been violently slapped across the face. Richard, I am incredibly tired, Pat. His voice violently cracked with emotion. I have been incredibly tired for a very, very long time. Jenna's jaw literally dropped wide open. Dad, just let her speak. The massive room fell utterly silent once again. I honestly had absolutely not anticipated that reaction. 30 entire years of silently watching my cowardly father actively avoid absolutely every single family conflict. 30 entire years of watching him silently look away while Patricia aggressively made me feel completely invisible. And now, finally, at the absolute bitter end, he was pushing back. It absolutely did not fix the decades of abuse. Not yet, anyway. But something fundamental in the universe had permanently shifted. Patricia stood entirely alone at the podium. She possessed absolutely zero allies left in the room. I almost felt a microscopic pang of pity for her. Almost. Shall I confidently continue? I asked the silent crowd. Absolutely no one objected. Good. I slowly pulled out the second document. Grandmother Grace's handwritten letter. Because you haven't even heard the absolute best part of the story yet. Patricia's face was completely, terrifyingly white now. She intimately knew. I could clearly see the sheer terror in her eyes. She knew exactly what explosive truth was coming, and she was utterly powerless to stop it. I confidently held up the certified will so absolutely everyone in the room could see the official seals. This specific document is heavily certified, fully notarized, and entirely legally binding, meticulously prepared exactly 5 years ago by Theodore Whitman, Grandma Grace's highly respected personal attorney. My voice was incredibly clear and rock-steady. I had meticulously rehearsed this exact moment in my head 100 times since that fateful meeting. It explicitly, legally states that the entirety of the Anderson estate, the historic house, the sprawling property, and absolutely all of its valuable contents passes entirely to me. Camille Atwood. Loud gasps violently rippled through the wealthy crowd. That specific, massive property has been in the Anderson family for over 60 years. Grandma Grace lived there for her entire married existence. I looked directly, unflinchingly at Patricia. She explicitly left it to me. Absolutely not to you. Absolutely not to Megan. Exclusively to me. That is completely impossible. Patricia desperately sputtered. That massive house was legally supposed to. I have aggressively maintained that entire property for 20 years. Maintained it? I slightly tilted my head in mock confusion. Or aggressively redecorated it exactly as if you already legally owned the deed. Someone sitting in the absolute back row loudly stifled a genuine laugh. The will explicitly includes a specific, handwritten statement. I began to read the text aloud. I make this definitive legal decision because Camille is the absolute only person in this sprawling family who genuinely loved me for myself and absolutely not for the assets I owned. Patricia's face violently contorted with pure rage. That senile, malicious old woman had absolutely no legal right to. Careful. My voice abruptly dropped to a dangerous, freezing octave. That is my beloved grandmother you are disrespectfully talking about. Aunt Helen abruptly stood up from her chair. The legal will is entirely, unquestionably valid, Patricia. I personally witnessed her signing it myself. More loud gasps, more frantic whispers. Patricia violently whirled on her sister-in-law. You intimately knew about this betrayal? Mother was completely lucid, significantly sharper than any of us in this room. Aunt Helen's voice was pure, unyielding ice. She intimately knew exactly what she was executing. I patiently let the devastating moment settle into the room. I let Patricia physically feel the impenetrable walls rapidly closing in around her. But here is the truly fascinating thing, I stated incredibly slowly, savoring the moment. The multi-million-dollar house isn't even the absolute most interesting part of the secret. Patricia's eyes went incredibly wide with sheer terror. There is actually more? A shocked guest whispered loudly. Significantly more. I slowly unfolded Grandma Grace's handwritten letter. My grandmother lovingly wrote this specific letter entirely by hand, and it explicitly explains something that fundamentally changes absolutely everything. The massive room was so utterly quiet, I could literally hear the crystal chandelier prisms gently tinkling above us. I read aloud, projecting my voice. My dearest Camille, you are absolutely not a random stranger who is casually adopted by chance. You are absolutely not some pathetic charitable act or a convenient tax benefit. You are my actual blood. My real, biological blood. You are my biological granddaughter. The biological daughter of Marcus, my beloved firstborn son. Absolute, unadulterated chaos violently erupted in the room. Wealthy guests frantically turning to each other in shock. Voices loudly overlapping in confusion. Marcus? Who on earth is Marcus? Patricia fiercely gripped the edges of the wooden podium exactly as if she might physically collapse onto the floor. That is an absolute, fabricated lie. She managed to choke out. Marcus was Richard's older brother. Aunt Helen's voice violently cut through the chaotic noise. He tragically passed away when Camille was exactly 2 years old. Every single head in the room instantly swiveled toward her. He severely struggled with crippling addiction issues. Our aristocratic parents aggressively disowned him. They coldly pretended he had absolutely never existed. Aunt Helen's voice was incredibly steady, but heavy with ancient, unresolved grief. When Marcus tragically died, Mother was absolutely devastated. He possessed a young daughter, a 2-year-old toddler who desperately needed a stable home. She looked directly at me, her eyes shining with unshed tears. Mother aggressively begged Richard to take her in, to keep Marcus's innocent child safely within the family bloodline. I could barely pull oxygen into my lungs. Richard had thick, heavy tears rapidly running down his aged face. You are undeniably my biological niece, Camille. Aunt Helen said incredibly softly. You inherently always have been. I slowly turned my body to face Patricia. You explicitly knew. It was absolutely not a question. You have intimately known the truth this entire time. She said absolutely nothing in response. Her suffocating silence was a massive, undeniable admission of guilt. 30 entire years. My voice violently shook slightly with the sheer magnitude of the betrayal. You maliciously made me feel exactly like a worthless outsider for 30 entire years, when I inherently possessed significantly more biological right to be in this family than you ever did. Patricia opened her mouth to form a response. But I was absolutely not finished destroying her yet. And that is incredibly still not absolutely everything. I reached deep into the heavy envelope and slowly pulled out the smaller, heavily sealed packet. The exact one I had absolutely not opened until tonight. Grandma Grace had explicitly written on the front of it, "Only open when absolutely necessary." If this horrific spectacle wasn't considered absolutely necessary, absolutely nothing ever would be. My grandmother left me exactly one more explosive thing, I stated to the room. She explicitly told me to only open it when I truly, desperately needed it. I looked directly at Patricia, at her stark white face, her violently shaking hands. I strongly think tonight definitely qualifies. Patricia violently lunged forward across the space. Camille, please wait. Whatever explosive secret is inside there, we can quietly discuss this privately. Privately? I aggressively held the packet high out of her reach. Exactly like you privately planned to maliciously humiliate me tonight? Exactly like you privately recorded it so you could gleefully share my agonizing shame with absolutely everyone online? She completely froze in her tracks. Yes, I successfully figured out your entire pathetic scheme. I briefly glanced over at Megan, who was now frantically attempting to turn off her recording phone. The massive public shaming, the digital recording. You genuinely thought if you embarrassed me severely enough, I would simply disappear into the shadows. Then you could easily contest the massive will without a fight. Patricia's mouth worked completely soundlessly. How on earth did you? It absolutely doesn't matter how I knew. I carefully, deliberately broke the heavy wax seal. What truly matters is exactly what is hidden inside. I slowly pulled out 2 highly official items. First, a certified DNA testing result document dated exactly 28 years ago. Second, an incredibly old, physical photograph, heavily faded at the edges. I intensely studied them for a long, silent moment. My hands visibly trembled, absolutely not with fear, but with the immense, crushing weight of understanding finally, perfectly clicking into place. Grandma Grace kept incredibly thorough, meticulous records, I stated incredibly quietly. Very highly thorough. I slowly looked up at Patricia. Would you deeply like to explain these documents to the crowd, or should I gladly do the honors? Her face had violently transitioned from stark white to a sickly shade of green. 40 affluent people collectively held their breath. I finally, truly understood exactly why Grandma Grace had fiercely chosen me, and exactly why Patricia had spent 30 grueling years desperately trying to make me feel like I didn't belong. I confidently held up the certified DNA test results. This official test was executed when I was exactly 2 years old, when Marcus, my biological father, was still alive. My voice was incredibly steady now, firmly grounded in the absolute truth. It definitively confirms I am his biological daughter. I closely studied the results again, at the specific, explosive detail that had made my breath violently catch when I first read it in my apartment. But there is actually something else. Something incredibly massive regarding Marcus himself. Patricia let out a strange, strangled sound from the podium. Marcus Anderson, I read the text loudly and clearly, was absolutely not biologically related to Harold Anderson, the specific man legally listed as his father. The entire room violently erupted in shock. What exactly does that mean? Someone desperately called out from the back. It means, Aunt Helen stated incredibly quietly, stepping forward, that our mother gave birth to Marcus long before she ever married our father. He originated from a previous, undisclosed relationship. Harold legally adopted him when they wed, but Marcus was absolutely never a biological Anderson. I let the massive revelation sink into the silent room. So Marcus absolutely wasn't Harold's biological son. I am Marcus's biological daughter. Which inherently means... I paused dramatically. The Anderson family currently possesses absolutely no biological blood claim to my grandmother's massive estate. Her sprawling property originated from her side of the family, absolutely not Harold's. I held up the faded photograph. An image of a beautiful young woman tenderly holding a baby. The exact same eyes, the exact same smile. You married into a family, I explicitly told Patricia, that possesses absolutely zero biological connection to this massive inheritance. The entire estate legally belongs exclusively to Grandma Grace's biological bloodline. I lifted the photograph even higher into the air. And that specific biological bloodline is exclusively me. Patricia physically swayed on her feet, grabbing the podium for support. You spent 30 agonizing years aggressively trying to make me feel exactly like I did not belong here, I stated, my voice echoing in the silence. But I am literally the absolute only person standing in this room who actually does belong. Someone in the back of the room unexpectedly started clapping. Then another person joined in. Then nearly half of the entire room was applauding. I absolutely did not smile. I was absolutely not executing this for their cheap applause. I was doing it exclusively for the truth. And the truth was finally, violently free. Patricia desperately attempted one final, pathetic counterattack. This is absolutely ridiculous. That fraudulent what can be easily contested in court. These ancient documents could easily be fabricated. They're absolutely not forged, Aunt Helen confidently stepped forward, her voice ringing with authority. I possess actual video recordings of Mother legally signing the will. I securely possess the original DNA results locked inside a safety deposit box, and I personally possess 20 entire years of meticulous documentation detailing exactly how horrifically you treated Camille. Patricia violently whirled around on Richard. Richard, are you genuinely just going to sit there like a coward? Are you really going to let them aggressively attack your own wife? Every single eye in the room violently turned to focus on him. Richard stood up incredibly slowly. For the absolute first time all evening, he looked his toxic wife directly in the eye. Camille is my biological niece, he stated incredibly quietly, his voice breaking. My older brother's daughter. She has inherently always been true family. His voice violently cracked with raw emotion. And I have shamefully spent 30 entire years silently watching you violently tear her down. Watching you maliciously make her feel entirely worthless. And I absolutely never stepped in to stop you. I never once protected her. He slowly turned his tear-filled eyes to me. I am so profoundly sorry, Camille. I am so deeply, deeply sorry. I offered a slow nod. I physically couldn't speak to him yet. Patricia desperately looked around the room at the affluent guests who absolutely refused to meet her frantic gaze, at Megan violently crying silently in the corner, at the complete, catastrophic collapse of the perfect, curated image she had aggressively constructed over 3 decades. "This is absolutely not over," she hissed venomously, her face contorted with rage. "I will aggressively fight this. I will. You will absolutely lose." My voice was incredibly calm and final. "The will is legally airtight. The forensic evidence is heavily documented. And absolutely everyone in this room just clearly heard you proudly call your adopted niece a tax benefit." I took a deliberate step closer to her. "You aggressively wanted to publicly humiliate me, Patricia. You desperately wanted to make me disappear in shame. But absolutely all you successfully accomplished was showing everyone in this city exactly what kind of monster you truly are." Patricia's face completely crumpled in absolute defeat. For the absolute first time in 30 years, she possessed absolutely nothing left to say. I finally let myself pull a deep breath of air into my lungs. The ancient anger was still undeniably there, tightly coiled deep inside my chest. But I absolutely refused to mutate into the monster that Patricia was. I did not desire petty revenge. I desired something significantly better. I absolutely did not come here tonight to violently destroy anyone, I stated quietly, addressing the silent room. I came exclusively because I genuinely thought, perhaps foolishly, that this was actually going to be a real birthday celebration. A few guests visibly shifted incredibly uncomfortably in their expensive seats. "You maliciously tried to take something vital from me tonight, Patricia. My inherent dignity, my fundamental sense of belonging. But here is exactly what you never, ever understood." I looked at her with a steady, unyielding gaze. "I absolutely do not require your toxic permission to explicitly know my own worth in this world. I never, ever did. I just pathetically spent 30 years falsely believing I did. I carefully gathered the explosive documents and securely returned them to my clutch purse. The massive estate is completely, legally mine. But I am absolutely not throwing anyone out onto the freezing street tonight. That historic house genuinely meant something to Grandma Grace. She deeply loved the people residing inside it, even you, although I honestly cannot begin to imagine why." Patricia rapidly blinked. She had absolutely not expected an ounce of mercy. "But absolutely everything changes starting right now." My voice hardened into unyielding steel. "I will absolutely no longer tolerate being treated exactly like I do not matter. Not anymore. From this specific moment forward, I am the one who sets the boundaries. Not you." I slowly turned my focus to Aunt Helen. "I possess a mountain of questions regarding Marcus, regarding Grandma Grace, and regarding absolutely everything I was maliciously never told about my history." She smiled beautifully through her streaming tears. "I will gladly tell you absolutely everything, sweetheart." I slowly looked around the opulent room one absolute final time. "Thank you all so incredibly much for attending my birthday party. It has been incredibly educational." A highly nervous, tense laugh rippled through the wealthy crowd. I calmly picked up my clutch purse, confidently straightened my dress, and slowly walked toward the exit doors. Behind me, I distinctly heard the rapid clicking of high heels. Frantic, panicked clicking. Patricia was abruptly leaving, violently running away from her own meticulously planned party, exactly like I had predicted she would. I absolutely did not bother to watch her go. I simply heard it. The sharp click, click, click of Patricia's heels retreating on the marble floor, the frantic rustle of her coat, the heavy, echoing thud of the restaurant's exit door. She was permanently gone. Megan stood completely paralyzed for a long moment, heavy black mascara streaking violently down her cheeks. Then, she aggressively grabbed her bag and sprinted out after her mother without making eye contact with a single soul. My father approached me incredibly slowly. "Camille." His voice was incredibly raw, thick with emotion. "I honestly do not even know what to say to you. You absolutely do not have to say a single thing right now. No." He violently shook his head. "I desperately need to. 30 agonizing years. 30 entire years I silently watched her do this horrific damage to your soul, and I cowardly said absolutely nothing. I absolutely should have." He couldn't finish the sentence. You were entirely right, I stated incredibly quietly. You absolutely should have. He violently flinched at the truth. But you finally spoke up tonight. That definitely counts for something. I met his tear-filled eyes. It is absolutely not enough. Not yet, but it is a definitive start. He offered a slow nod, frantically wiping his face with the back of his trembling hand. I urgently need to go after her. I need to make sure she is. He trailed off, looking lost. Marcus absolutely would have been so incredibly proud of you, Camille. I intimately know I possess absolutely no right to say that. But he genuinely would have been. Then he was gone too. The massive room slowly, collectively exhaled a breath it had been holding. Aunt Helen immediately wrapped her arms around my shoulders. Your beloved grandmother is absolutely smiling down right now, she whispered into my ear. I promise you that. I finally let myself be held. For the absolute first time in 30 agonizing years, I violently cried. Not from pain, not from suffocating humiliation, but from pure, unadulterated release. Someone in the back of the room hesitantly started humming the happy birthday song. Then another, stronger voice joined in. Then the entire, crowded room, soft and tentative at first, then growing louder. I laughed uncontrollably through my thick tears. Happy birthday to me. The absolute best one I had ever experienced in my life. The extravagant party absolutely did not end when Patricia cowardly fled the scene. Somehow, miraculously, impossibly, it actually truly began. Wealthy people I had barely spoken 2 words to my entire life cautiously approached me one by one. Mrs. Patterson, an elite woman who had been close friends with Grandma Grace for decades, squeezed my hands incredibly tightly. I inherently always sensed something was fundamentally, toxically wrong with how Pat treated you. Your grandmother talked about your brilliance constantly, you know. You were her absolute, undisputed favorite person on earth. Mr. Henderson, a wealthy family friend since before I was even born, shook my hand incredibly firmly. That took massive, undeniable guts, young lady. Real, raw guts. Lucas unexpectedly appeared directly at my elbow, holding 2 brimming glasses of expensive champagne. Doing okay? Honestly, I have absolutely no idea. I gratefully accepted the glass. I think my brain is still desperately trying to process everything. You were absolutely phenomenal. He cheerfully clinked his glass against mine. Absolutely, undeniably phenomenal. Aunt Helen pulled up a chair beside me and began talking endlessly about Marcus. About the brilliant brother she had tragically lost, and the horrific addiction that had violently stolen him away. She spoke passionately about his incredible artistic talent, his immense kindness, and the specific way his face would brilliantly light up whenever he gently held baby Camille. He was absolutely not a flawless, perfect person, she admitted softly, staring into her glass. He made catastrophic mistakes. But he loved your soul infinitely more than anything else in this entire world. In his final, agonizing months, absolutely all he ever talked about was desperately making sure you would possess a beautiful, good life. I eagerly learned things I had absolutely never known. That Marcus had been an incredibly gifted painter. That there was a stunning portrait of me as an infant that Grandma Grace had secretly kept hidden deep inside her bedroom closet. That his severe addiction tragically began after a horrific car accident left him trapped in constant, agonizing physical pain. He was absolutely not a villain, Aunt Helen stated incredibly softly. He was simply a man who was deeply hurting. There is a massive, fundamental difference. By the stroke of midnight, the guests who still remained in the room were there exclusively because they genuinely wanted to be. For me. Happy birthday, Camille. Someone enthusiastically called out from the crowd. I proudly raised my crystal glass high. You know what? It finally, truly is. Exactly 1 week following the explosive party, the social fallout was absolutely everywhere. Patricia had completely, entirely vanished from all of her usual, elite social circles. Absolutely no extravagant charity luncheons, no exclusive garden club meetings, no carefully curated, fake social media appearances. The scandalous word had aggressively spread. Someone present at the party had maliciously leaked the explosive story, and Boston's upper-middle-class gossip network aggressively ran with the juicy details. Meghan shockingly lost over 8,000 social media followers in a mere 5 days. Major, lucrative brands quietly, swiftly distanced themselves from her platform. As it brutally turns out, people generally do not want to purchase expensive skincare products from someone who cruelly laughed at her own sister's devastating public humiliation. Then, Richard unexpectedly called my phone. Richard. We agreed to meet at a quiet, independent coffee shop located incredibly far away from the family's usual elite haunts. He looked exactly as if he had violently aged an entire decade in a single week. I urgently need to tell you the absolute truth about Marcus, he stated quietly, staring down into his coffee. Really, truly tell you everything. So he did. He meticulously told me exactly how Marcus was undeniably the family's ultimate golden child once. He was brilliant, intensely creative, and absolutely everyone's favorite son. Until the tragic accident. Until the highly addictive pain pills took over. Until the severe addiction violently swallowed absolutely everything good in his life. Our aristocratic parents completely gave up on his recovery, Richard stated, his voice full of shame. They aggressively pretended he simply didn't exist anymore. And Mom, your grandmother, she absolutely never forgave them for abandoning him. And she never forgave herself either. She inherently knew she couldn't have single-handedly saved him. No, but she actively, fiercely saved you. He looked at me with incredibly red-rimmed, exhausted eyes. She aggressively made me swear a blood oath to take you into my home, to lovingly raise you exactly as my own flesh and blood. And I genuinely did. But I catastrophically failed at absolutely everything else. I cowardly let Patricia aggressively control everything. I let you grow up constantly feeling entirely unwanted and defective. Why on earth did you let her? Because I was a pathetic coward. His voice violently broke into a sob. Terrified of confrontation, terrified of Patricia's wrath, terrified of absolutely everything. I absolutely did not forgive him that day. I was entirely not ready to cross that bridge. But I also absolutely did not aggressively walk away either. This is absolutely not the final end, I stated softly. But it might be a tentative start. He nodded, hot tears freely streaming down his face. Baby steps. That is absolutely all any of us can take right now. I explicitly know this particular story is incredibly heavy and dark. If you have ever been violently forced to establish ironclad boundaries with highly toxic family members, if you have ever agonizingly felt exactly like a discarded outsider inside your own home, I desperately want to hear from you. Please drop a comment. Share your personal story of survival. I promise you, I read every single one and, honestly, explicitly knowing that I am absolutely not alone in surviving this nightmare helps me infinitely more than I can possibly say. Okay, let me tell you exactly what happened when I finally, bravely visited the massive estate. Exactly 2 weeks following the explosive party, I confidently drove to the sprawling Anderson estate. I had been aggressively avoiding the property. A massive part of my soul was absolutely not emotionally ready to face the exact physical place where I had spent so many miserable holidays feeling completely invisible. The exact house Patricia had arrogantly treated exactly like her own personal, royal kingdom. But it was officially, legally mine now. I desperately needed to see it with fresh eyes. Patricia and Meghan had hastily, angrily moved out the previous week. They were currently staying in a highly temporary, cheap rental apartment while they desperately tried to figure things out, according to Aunt Helen's gossip network. They had aggressively taken all of their personal, expensive belongings, but had thankfully left the actual, structural bones of the historic house intact. I walked through the incredibly quiet, echoing rooms very, very slowly. The opulent parlor where Patricia had constantly hosted her elite parties, intentionally, constantly positioning me hidden in the extreme background. The massive dining room where I had suffered through countless, agonizingly awkward holiday meals. The sprawling, beautiful garden where Grandma Grace and I used to have long, deep talks, while Patricia angrily watched us with extreme disapproval from the kitchen window. I slowly climbed the grand staircase toward Grandma Grace's sprawling master bedroom. The room still faintly smelled exactly like her. dried lavender, and the distinct scent of old, beloved books. I sat heavily on the edge of her massive bed and finally let the heavy tears freely come. Tucked deep inside the absolute back of her massive walk-in closet, heavily hidden behind thick winter coats and dusty hat boxes, I discovered a heavy cardboard box with visibly worn corners. Tucked safely inside were hundreds of physical photographs, dozens upon dozens of them. Marcus as a young, innocent child. Marcus as an incredibly vibrant teenager, his hands heavily stained with colorful oil paint. Marcus tenderly holding a tiny newborn baby. Me. He was grinning intensely at the camera, exactly as if he had just miraculously won the ultimate lottery. Scrawled carefully on the back of that specific, final photograph, in Grandma Grace's unmistakable, looping handwriting, Marcus and Camille, my two absolute, greatest loves. 1994, I forcefully pressed the fragile photograph tightly to my chest and violently sobbed. I had absolutely never, ever seen his physical face until this exact moment. But looking intently at the photograph of him, I explicitly, undeniably saw my own reflection. The exact same piercing eyes, the exact same slightly crooked, authentic smile. I so desperately wish I had known you, I whispered aloud to the empty, quiet room. The massive house remained completely silent. But for the absolute, very first time in my life, it genuinely, truly felt exactly like a home. Exactly 3 weeks following the explosive party, my cell phone unexpectedly rang. The caller ID displayed Megan's name. Every single primal instinct inside my brain violently screamed at me to let it roll directly to voicemail. But morbid curiosity ultimately won the internal battle. "Please, I am begging you, do not hang up the phone," she blurted out immediately, her voice frantic. "Please." I sat down heavily on a chair. "I am actively listening. Can we please meet in person? Somewhere entirely neutral. I desperately need to. I honestly do not know. I urgently need to talk to you." We cautiously met at a small, independent coffee shop located on the entirely opposite side of the sprawling city. Megan looked completely, fundamentally different. Significantly smaller, somehow. Absolutely no flawless, perfect makeup. Absolutely no Instagram-ready, expensive designer outfit. Just an incredibly exhausted, tired young woman wearing basic jeans and a deeply wrinkled, oversized sweater. "I am absolutely not here to offer you an apology," she stated immediately, aggressively avoiding eye contact. "I mean, I absolutely know I should. I explicitly know I should. But I am honestly just not emotionally there yet." "Then exactly why are you here?" I asked softly. She stared blankly down at her entirely untouched latte. "I desperately need to understand exactly why Grandma loved your soul infinitely more than mine." I slowly blinked in sheer shock. "What?" "She inherently always looked at you entirely differently. Like you were incredibly, uniquely special." Megan's voice violently cracked with raw emotion. "She absolutely never, ever looked at me that specific way. Not a single time in my life. Mom constantly, viciously told me it was simply because you were the pathetic, poor orphan, and Grandma just felt immense, suffocating guilt. But that absolutely wasn't the actual truth, was it? No, it absolutely wasn't. You were actually her biological granddaughter by blood." Megan let out a short, incredibly bitter, harsh laugh. "And I was simply the pathetic, runner-up consolation prize. Megan, Mom aggressively told me my entire life that I was the lucky, chosen, real daughter. That you were the unfortunate, adopted interloper." Her eyes rapidly welled up with thick, hot tears. "But perhaps I was the actual one who never, ever truly knew exactly where I stood in the family. I honestly did not know exactly what to say to her. This vulnerability was entirely new. I am absolutely not sitting here asking for your forgiveness," she continued, rapidly wiping her eyes. "I explicitly know I do not deserve an ounce of it. But is there absolutely any microscopic chance, ever, that we could attempt to start over?" I carefully, deeply considered the massive weight of her question. "The heavy door is absolutely not permanently locked and closed," I finally stated. "But you're absolutely going to have to aggressively, genuinely earn your way through it." She nodded her head slowly. It was undeniably the very beginning of something new. I just did not know exactly what it would become yet. Exactly 1 month following the explosive party, I meticulously created a list. It was absolutely not a vindictive revenge list. It was an ironclad, non-negotiable boundary list. Patricia, absolute, permanent no contact. She is strictly, legally not welcome at the estate. If she desires to communicate, it must explicitly go through my retained attorneys. Richard, highly limited, cautious contact. I am open to slowly rebuilding a connection, but incredibly slowly. Genuine trust would be actively earned, absolutely not blindly assumed. Megan, a strict wait-and-see approach. She had finally displayed a massive crack in her toxic armor, but deep cracks can easily be sealed back over. I would only believe in real, sustained change when I actively witnessed evidence of it. Aunt Helen, true family. Real, authentic family. The exact kind of loving family I had spent 30 years desperately wishing for. I cautiously began making minor, superficial changes to the massive estate. Absolutely nothing overly dramatic. I was absolutely not attempting to violently erase the beautiful memories. But I officially converted Grandma Grace's sprawling bedroom into a dedicated memorial space. Her favorite, framed photographs, Marcus's beautiful, original artwork, and the stunning, oil-painted portrait of infant me that he had lovingly painted right before he tragically died. A beautiful, visual tribute to the specific people who had fiercely loved me long before I possessed the ability to remember them. Then I aggressively executed something significantly bigger. I legally, officially created the Marcus Anderson Memorial Scholarship Fund. It was designed exclusively for vulnerable kids aging directly out of the broken foster care system who desperately wanted to study fine art or structural architecture. Because your talented father tragically never received a second chance in life, Aunt Helen stated softly when I proudly revealed the plan to her. But perhaps, through this fund, someone else's child can. Exactly. The very first scholarship recipient was an incredibly shy, 17-year-old girl named Maya. She had been trapped in the brutal foster system since she was exactly 9 years old. Absolutely no stable, loving home. Zero family who actively chose her. But she possessed the ability to draw architectural sketches, like absolutely nothing I had ever witnessed in my life. At the official scholarship award ceremony, she nervously tugged on the sleeve of my blazer. Did you ever, for a single moment, feel exactly like you did not truly belong anywhere in the world? Every single, agonizing day of my entire life, I told her with absolute, unvarnished honesty. Until the exact moment I finally stopped pathetically waiting for someone else's permission. Permission for what? To truly belong. To fundamentally matter. To confidently take up physical space in the universe. I smiled brilliantly at her. You absolutely do not need anyone's toxic permission to exist, Maya. And neither did I. I just unfortunately took 30 entire years to finally figure that out. She fiercely hugged me. It genuinely felt exactly like pure hope. Exactly 6 months following the explosive party, I officially hosted a memorial gathering at the sprawling estate. It was absolutely not a somber funeral. We had already agonizingly endured that event. This was something entirely different. A joyous celebration. A loving remembrance. A definitive closing of painful, dark chapters and the beautiful, bright opening of entirely new ones. The curated guest list was incredibly intimate. Aunt Helen, Richard, who had been slowly, agonizingly, painfully attempting to rebuild his shattered character. Lucas, Mrs. Patterson, and a select few of Grandma Grace's absolutely oldest, dearest friends. And Maya, the brilliant scholarship recipient, whom I had officially begun professionally mentoring. Absolutely no Patricia. Absolutely no Megan. Not yet. Perhaps absolutely never. I meticulously arranged the framed photographs prominently on the stone mantelpiece. Grandma Grace glowing brilliantly on her wedding day, looking incredibly young and radiantly beautiful. Marcus at exactly 20 years old, holding a paint-stained brush, his eyes completely full of massive dreams he would tragically never live to fulfill. And the specific, hidden photograph of him joyously holding infant me. The exact one I had miraculously found hidden deep in the dark closet. I confidently spoke first. For the vast majority of my entire life, I possessed absolutely no idea who I truly was. I explicitly knew I was adopted. I intimately knew I was fundamentally different. I painfully knew I absolutely did not fit into the mold. My voice remained completely, unshakably steady. But I absolutely did not know that I possessed a biological father who fiercely, unconditionally loved me. A brilliant grandmother who violently fought for my survival. A rich, beautiful history that was undeniably, biologically mine. I looked warmly at the framed photographs. Grandma Grace spent her absolute final years aggressively making certain I would eventually learn the unvarnished truth. That I would possess the powerful, legal tools to fiercely defend myself when the time inevitably arrived. She tragically couldn't entirely protect me while she was alive, absolutely not completely. But she brilliantly, resourcefully found a way to do it after she was gone. I slowly, deliberately lit 2 small, white candles. One specifically for her, and one specifically for Marcus. I absolutely never had the privilege to meet my father, but he is an undeniable, biological part of my soul. I vividly see his reflection every single time I look into the mirror. Richard was weeping entirely openly now, making no attempt to hide his tears. Aunt Helen fiercely, protectively held my hand. To Grace, I stated incredibly softly into the quiet room. And to Marcus, I deeply hope you are peacefully together now. To Grace and Marcus, absolutely everyone in the room echoed in unison. The warm candle flames flickered gently, almost exactly like steady heartbeats. I smiled beautifully through my falling tears. The highly publicized, official launch of the Marcus Anderson Memorial Scholarship eventually made the positive, local news broadcasts. The sprawling estate had been beautifully transformed for the massive event. Not aggressively into something completely unrecognizable, but into something vibrant and new. Incredibly warm, highly welcoming. The exact kind of loving, chaotic home Marcus likely might have built if he had been granted the chance to live. A modest, enthusiastic crowd gathered on the lawn. Passionate arts education advocates, resilient former foster youth, and eager local journalists. And standing proudly at the absolute center, 10 incredibly talented young artists publicly displayed their stunning work. Every single one of them a proud scholarship recipient. I stood confidently at the wooden podium and looked out at a sea of faces completely full of raw, unadulterated hope. My talented father tragically never received a second chance in this life, I stated clearly into the microphone. He severely struggled with his demons. And when he desperately reached out for a lifeline, he was aggressively turned away. Violently disowned. Completely, maliciously erased from history. I took a deep, steadying breath. I absolutely do not want a single, vulnerable child to ever feel completely erased. I absolutely do not want any aspiring artist to falsely believe their massive dreams are not fiercely worth fighting for. I proudly gestured toward the line of beaming scholarship recipients. These incredible young people are absolutely not pathetic charity cases. They're absolutely not convenient tax deductions. A highly knowing, supportive laugh rippled loudly through the gathered crowd. They're the brilliant future, and they inherently deserve absolutely every single opportunity to shine. Afterward, Maya, the very first recipient, gently tugged on the sleeve of my blazer. Ms. Anderson, can I please ask you something highly personal? Always, Maya. Did you ever, for a single moment, genuinely feel like absolutely no matter what you accomplished, certain people would always view you as inherently less than? I slowly knelt down to her eye level. Every single, agonizing day of my entire life. Until I finally learned something incredibly important. What was it? That their highly toxic, flawed opinion of me was absolutely not my actual truth. My truth was entirely mine to aggressively create. I offered her a warm, genuine smile. And so is yours, Maya. She violently hugged me, incredibly quick and unbelievably fierce. Thank you so much, she whispered into my shoulder, for making me feel exactly like I actually matter in this world. I hugged her back just as tightly. You absolutely do matter, Maya. You inherently always have. The press cameras brightly flashed, but I was absolutely not thinking about the media coverage. I was thinking deeply about the concept of legacy, and how it absolutely never truly ends. It simply, beautifully transforms. That specific night, I sat completely alone in Grandma Grace's sprawling bedroom. The small, white candles from the emotional memorial still gently flickered on the stone mantel. The framed photographs silently, protectively watched over me in the dim light. Outside the massive window, the city of Boston glittered brilliantly against a clear, freezing winter sky. I thought deeply about absolutely everything that had fundamentally changed. Exactly what I had permanently lost. The toxic, suffocating fantasy of a loving, supportive family. The pathetic, crushing delusion that if I just desperately tried hard enough, Patricia would eventually, miraculously accept me. The weak, terrified version of myself that constantly bent, broke, and pathetically begged to fit into a tiny, claustrophobic space that was absolutely never designed or built for my soul. And exactly what I had ultimately gained. The unvarnished truth. A fierce, unshakable identity. Real, authentic connections with specific people who actively, continuously chose me. Aunt Helen. Richard, in his own highly imperfect, struggling way. Incredibly loyal friends who actively showed up when it counted. Absolute freedom from endlessly seeking toxic validation I was absolutely never, ever going to receive. And something significantly harder to accurately name. True, absolute peace. I slowly looked at the vintage photograph of Marcus. I so desperately wish you could physically see me right now, I whispered softly into the quiet room. I genuinely think you would be incredibly proud of me. The tiny candle flame danced wildly, exactly as if in joyful response. Grandma Grace had successfully taught me something incredibly profound through her ultimate, final gift. You absolutely cannot violently force toxic people to love your soul. You absolutely cannot painfully contort your identity into belonging somewhere that maliciously refuses to hold space for your existence. But you absolutely can aggressively build a beautiful life where you inherently belong to yourself first. Where your fundamental worth isn't a cruel, arbitrary verdict handed down by abusers. That is exactly what I had finally, victoriously done. I slowly picked up my smartphone and typed a brief, powerful note. Things I explicitly know for absolute certain. 1. I am inherently worthy of profound love. My own love first and foremost. 2. I absolutely do not require a single person's toxic permission to belong in this universe. 3. Establishing ironclad boundaries is absolutely not an act of cruelty. It is pure, essential self-preservation. 4. The specific people who truly matter will actively choose your presence. Immediately release the toxic ones who absolutely don't. I securely saved the note. Then I confidently stood up, blew out the flickering candles, and walked steadily toward my brilliant future. Behind me, the massive historic house settled into a comfortable, warm quiet. I was finally, truly home. Here is exactly what I have learned after analyzing this entire nightmare. After absolutely everything that explosively happened, I spent a massive amount of time aggressively trying to understand Patricia's twisted psychology. Absolutely not to offer her forgiveness. I am absolutely not there emotionally, and I genuinely may never be. But simply to make clinical, logical sense of the madness. A highly skilled trauma therapist brilliantly explained it to me this exact way. Highly toxic individuals exactly like Patricia do not maliciously hate you because there is something fundamentally wrong or defective with your soul. They aggressively hate you because you serve as a permanent, living representation of something dark and shameful they absolutely cannot bear to face within themselves. My biological father, Marcus, was the ultimate, shameful family secret. The massive, tragic failure they desperately wanted to permanently erase from the historical record. And every single time Patricia was forced to look directly at my face, she unavoidably saw his ghost. She clearly saw absolutely everything the aristocratic Anderson name desperately wanted to bury in the dirt. Her relentless, calculating cruelty was absolutely never truly about my actions. It was entirely, exclusively about her own suffocating fear. Fear of losing absolute control over the narrative. Fear of public exposure. Fear of fundamentally not measuring up to high society's impossible standards. She aggressively managed that overwhelming fear by maliciously making me feel microscopic. By aggressively making me the designated problem, instead of actually examining her own horrific reflection in the mirror. That psychological explanation absolutely does not excuse a single, solitary, evil thing she did to me. Not even remotely close. But finally understanding the mechanics of the abuse ultimately helped me permanently stop blaming myself for the trauma. And me? My ultimate, fatal weakness was inherently always blindly believing I had to aggressively earn basic human love. I literally spent 30 agonizing years constantly auditioning for a scrap of acceptance. Endlessly performing. Constantly bending. Violently shrinking my own soul. Desperately trying to prove I inherently deserved a tiny seat at a table that was absolutely never, ever going to welcome my presence. The absolute, unvarnished truth is, you absolutely do not have to aggressively prove you are worthy of love. You simply, inherently are. If you are sitting there watching this video and you are currently trapped in a toxic relationship, whether it is family, romantic, or friendship, where you constantly, agonizingly feel like you must endlessly justify your very existence, you must ask yourself, why exactly am I endlessly performing, and exactly who am I performing for? The specific individuals who genuinely, unconditionally love your soul will absolutely never, ever force you to audition for their affection. That is the ultimate, profound lesson. That is exactly what 30 grueling years of crushing pain finally crystallized into absolute, blinding clarity for me. Thank you so incredibly much for staying by my side through the entirety of this dark, heavy story. If any specific part of it resonated deep within your soul, if you have ever agonizingly felt exactly like an unwanted outsider inside your own home, if you have ever been violently forced to draw terrifying lines in the sand that you were incredibly scared to draw, if you have ever uncovered an explosive truth that forced you to completely rebuild your entire reality from scratch, I desperately want to hear about it. Please leave a comment below. Share your incredible story of survival with me. I promise you, I read every single one and honestly, explicitly knowing that I am absolutely not alone in surviving this type of trauma helps me infinitely more than I can possibly articulate. If this specific story meant something profound to you, please hit the subscribe button. Absolutely not for the sake of the digital algorithm, but because if you are still sitting here listening to my voice, you probably intimately understand exactly what it means to violently fight for your own inherent worth. And I desperately want to continue sharing powerful stories exactly like this one with resilient people exactly like you. Please check the description box below for more incredible narratives of survival. And always remember, you absolutely do not need anyone's toxic permission to belong in this universe. You absolutely never ever did. I will see you all in the next story.